Welcome. I'm so excited today. We have a very special guest. It is Arielle Ford, and she's definitely a love and relationship expert. And you're also a very known thought leader in personal growth and spirituality. And you have 25 years experience in teaching, living, and promoting consciousness. And you've written a total of 11 books, including the bestseller, The Soulmate Secret, Manifest the Love of Your Life with the Law of Attraction. What a beauty. And then you also written the book, Turn Your Mate into Your Soulmate. And you're called the Cupid of Consciousness and the Fairy Godmother of Love. And I love that. That's the best description ever. And also, I just read you live in La Jolla in San Diego. Yeah. Together with your husband, soulmate, Brian, and your feline friends, which I just found out means cats.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I heard that La Jolla is a big swinger area in San Diego. I've been to La Jolla and I have friends there that I've talked to.
Really? I've lived here over 25 years and I've never heard that. And I doubt that it's true. Most of the people that live in La Jolla are elderly, wealthy, white people.
Okay.
Not party animals. They're socialites. I don't hang out with them, but they're not
the funky fresh types.
No. Now further up the road, about 45 minutes north of me, there's a little town called Encinitas.
That's the one. Sorry.
Yeah.
The one.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's true for Encinitas. That's where all the so-called spiritual people who practice polyamory and drink a lot of wheatgrass, and the hippies live in Encinitas.
Sorry.
It's probably true for that area.
It is.
But not true for La Jolla.
It's been too long. I mixed them up. I think my business coach, Shanda Sumpner, maybe lived in La Jolla, and then I had friends. And anyways, I used to be a lot in San Diego and I miss it. So I mixed it up. Anyways, that's not what we're supposed to talk about today.
I know Shanda. I went to her wedding.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I love Shanda and Ash. I've worked with them, coached with them and their leadership training. It's amazing work that they're doing. Anyways, so you can tell me tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's kind of a super long story. The short version is that what I'm up to at the moment is I teach people how to find love, keep love, and be love. And it came out of, I never woke up one morning and said, oh, I should become a love expert. It came out of necessity. You know, I was 43 years old and single and decided that it was time to manifest a soulmate. So I did that. And then every woman over 40 wanted to know how I did it. So I started teaching that. And then I got married. And then I found out I had no partnership skills. So I decided to become a student of love and study that, and ended up learning a lot about that. And then I learned along the way that the only way to keep love is to actually be love. You actually have to love yourself and learn how to love the people around you. And I discovered that most people, I'd say 99% of the people in the world, have no idea what love is. They have a really ridiculous misconception that love is a feeling. Oh, Samantha, I know I love you because I feel it. I feel all this love for you. Therefore, I love you. And love is not a feeling. There are feelings to love, but anybody who's ever been married knows that you can love your spouse and have days when you hate them. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them, because love is a behavior. Love is a choice. It's a decision. It's a practice. It's an action. It's a way of being. And yes, there are days when you feel love, but love is not a feeling. And until people really get that, they're going to live in an ongoing state of frustration and upset and disappointment because they don't understand why they're not feeling the love. And the sensations that most people call love is really nature's greatest drug high. It's your brain on drugs. It's your brain on oxytocin and dopamine and adrenaline. And yes, it feels great and it's wonderful, but it's not love. It's a drug high. And it's nature's trick to get us to procreate, which is why it doesn't last too long. Most people have the experience of the feelings of being loved, and it lasts anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. And then it pretty much disappears for most of the time. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your partner, right? It just means that the drugs have worn out and you're now going to what real love is. Real, mature, adult love is very different than the state of being in love. Because the state of being in love, I believe, is the socially acceptable form of insanity.
Yeah.
You know, it's great. It's like, oh my God, it's like champagne bubbles running through your bloodstream. It feels really good. But you don't really know that person. You think you do. It's like, oh, I've known you forever. We've had lifetimes together. You're my twin flame. But the truth is, you don't know them,
Yeah.
you know? And really, when you're seeking out a partner, the most important thing you need to do is to get to know somebody. What are their values? Do they share your values? Do you guys have a shared vision for the future? Because you could truly, deeply love somebody, and it doesn't mean that they're a compatible life partner for you. So that's the short version.
That was actually my first question. What is love? I love that what you said, that love, you said many things, but I picked up choice. And I'm also thinking investment. You didn't say that, but love is something permanent and not this drug. And I completely agree. And it's not very helpful, not for me anyways, the drugs. It has nothing to do with love. Like, it's beautiful what you said. How did you came to figure that out?
Just by paying attention, you know, because after I got married, I mean, I was in the same crazy, you know, living in the myth that, oh, when I find my soulmate, we will live happily ever after. Now, I did find a soulmate, you know, on every level we were soulmates. But there were days when I hated him and I wanted to understand why. I wanted to understand why things weren't just peachy all the time, you know, and why things he did triggered me and pushed my buttons, and why couldn't I get him to change? And so I literally became a student of this work. I really needed to understand for myself. And there are so many great teachers out there. And what I ended up doing was interviewing all the masters of love and marriage and relationship. And I have about 200 hours of recorded interviews where I would ask them these big questions, like, really, what is love? And how do you know if you're with the right partner? And what can you do to coexist with somebody who's making you crazy? And the thing that I learned for myself was back in the 1980s, when I had my PR firm, I represented a lot of art galleries on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. And so all of the art trade publications came to my office every week. And one day I got, I think it was either Art in America or Art News came, and there was a cover story on something called Wabi-Sabi. And Wabi-Sabi is a Japanese aesthetic that honors all things old, worn, imperfect, and impermanent. And it seeks to find beauty and perfection and imperfection. And I was just sort of enraptured with this idea. Oh, could there be beauty in imperfection? And I decided to sort of dedicate myself to becoming a wabi-sabi artisan. Could I find beauty in my own imperfections, of which there were many, because I knew I wasn't perfect, right? And I knew that nobody I knew was perfect. So could I find the beauty and perfection in other people's imperfections? So I created something for myself called Wabi-Sabi Love. And I'll tell you a brief story that really beautifully illustrates this, because it's a weird concept. It sounds like something you'd eat at a sushi bar, which is wasabi, but this is wabi-sabi. So I have these friends named Jerry and Diane. And Jerry is a psychiatrist and Diane's a psychologist. And when they got together, he was 25 years older than her. This was a second marriage for both of them. And as soon as they got married, Diane discovered that Jerry had an addiction. And Jerry's addiction is poppy seed bagels. Every single morning he would wake up, usually long before she did. He'd go into the kitchen and he'd get a poppy seed bagel. And for those of you who don't know what a bagel is, it's like a round, hard, not sweet donut, just a paste. It's a form of bread. And he'd slice the poppy seed bagel, and lots of little black seeds would fall all over Diane's white tile floor. And then she would get up an hour later, and the first thing she would do every day is wet a paper towel, get on her hands and knees, and wipe up all the little black seeds. And then, so he'd toast the bagel, then he'd put cream cheese on the bagel, then he'd walk around the kitchen eating the bagel, dropping even more black seeds all over the white tile floor. Now, this went on every day for years. And of course, Diane knew that Jerry, being older than her, couldn't get on the floor to wipe up the seeds, that it was her job. And most days she didn't care. She didn't mind. It wasn't a big deal until the day that it was. One day she was really cranky. And as she was wiping up the little black seeds, she had this thought, oh, what would have to happen so that I never do this again? And that was followed by the thought, oh, that would mean Jerry's no longer with me. And she began to cry. And from that day on, every single morning as she wiped up the little black seeds, her heart would fill with love, because the seeds now meant she had another day to spend with Jerry.
Beautiful.
So that's what Wabi-Sabi Love is. It's a shift in perception. Now, did she go to Jerry and say, Jerry, we've got to talk. You've got to stop this with you've got to slice the bagel over the sink. I can't stand that. She never talked to
seeds.
Right? She never talked to him about it. Amazing. All she did was shift her perception, and she took something that once annoyed her into something that gave her joy.
Wow. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that, but that's amazing.
But you can, it's just a matter of being creative about it. Like my husband's now doing something that makes me crazy. It never used to happen before, but a few years ago, he had a stroke, and he's not quite as together as he used to be. He's in really good shape. But the thing that he does now is that I cook, he washes the dishes. Only when he's done washing the dishes, the floor is now got puddles all over it. I walk around barefoot, so I hate my feet getting wet because he's left puddles, right? So, my solution to it is, because I've talked to him about it, and if you've ever tried to change anybody, it never works. Talking just doesn't do it. So now what I do is I get 2 paper towels, I put them under my feet, and I scoot around on the floor, cleaning up the floor and not feeling the water, because it's not going to change. So it's just a new fun thing I do. And if I want to be annoying, sometimes I leave the dirty paper towels on the floor.
It is a good choice. Perception.
Yeah, it's just a shift in perception. And is it worth getting divorced over? No.
But I think, Arielle, when you have a time between connection, and for me and my now ex-husband, it was making love, right? So the longer apart since last connection, it could be anything, but it can also be making love. All these things all of a sudden become an issue that are not, does the mess around the house matter after great sex? And everybody says no. And why is that? Something that could be a huge issue dissolves.
Yeah.
So if you haven't connected in a while, maybe these things come up again, and then it's not enough to shift your mind.
It really depends what the issue is. For some people, yes, it's sex. For other people, depending on their age, sex isn't as important to them anymore. But here's the thing that most people don't know. There's a man named Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington, who is the world's leading researcher on marriage. For more than 50 years, he's been researching what couples do. And his research has shown that every single couple, not some, all couples have a minimum of 9 irreconcilable differences. These are things on which they are never, ever going to agree. And yet they can have a happy marriage. Now, why is that? Well, here's what some of the things are. The number one thing, money. And almost always in a partnership, you have a spender and a saver. I mean, you come into the partnership with different ideas about money, right? So you have to come up with creative solutions. Money, sex, parenting. One person's clean and neat, the other person's messy and chaotic. These are just normal, but it isn't normal to leave a perfectly good partner because you do things in a different way. So you need to be able to figure out creative solutions that are win-win. And that takes work, and that takes conversation and dialogue. When Brian and I got together, money was definitely the number one issue. We both had money. We both made a lot of money, but he was a spender and I was a saver. I grew up without much money. I grew up with a whole family history of poverty consciousness, of people surviving the Depression and the Holocaust, and there's never enough. And I'm Jewish, so it's in my DNA that there's never enough.
That's a
And
story.
he grew up, right? He grew up in a wealthy family, the youngest in a wealthy family. So by the time he got there, his parents were at the country club every day, and he had credit cards, and his mother told him to only buy the best designer goods. And it never occurred to him that he might not have enough money. So what we ended up doing, because I was appalled that he was spending $75 on a bottle of Cabernet and $2,000 on an Armani raincoat, and I had never paid retail for anything, I had to, come to terms with the fact that it was mostly my issue. I needed to be really vulnerable and explain it to him. And then, because he'd never heard of such a thing, and then we had to come up with a solution. So the solution was we would have 3 piles of money. I would have the money I earned, he would have the money he earned, and then we would have the money that we spent together jointly. And the agreement was we didn't police each other on our individual money, but on the joint money, we had an agreement. Nobody ever spent more than a certain amount without consulting the other. And that worked just fine, and it worked. We did it for about the first 15 years. And then finally I thought, oh, you know what? He's a financially responsible guy, right? And he's learned how to shop a sale every once in a while. And I've learned to appreciate designer goods. And then it no longer became a problem between the two of us. Now, do I still have poverty consciousness? I do, and I work on it all the time, but it's not the gripping, oh my God, what's he doing kind of stuff. I now totally own that if I'm having, thoughts of poverty consciousness, I need to work on myself.
So you've pulled it all together. There's not 3 piles, there's 1 pile.
There's pretty much, there's just 1 pile these days. Yeah, it's, and, but it was a huge issue, because I was getting really nervous. And like I said, it wasn't that we didn't have the money, it was just the way it was spent and because when I looked at how he grew up, well, of course, that's what would make sense to him. He grew up with money and then he got out into the world and he made money. I grew up without money. All I wanted to do was hoard it, and make sure I had enough. So, yeah, but that's what Wabi-Sabi Love's about. It's really about being a mature, responsible adult, and then picking a partner that is financially responsible. So for single people out there, you need to, in the dating process, if you're going to go and live with somebody, whether you're married or not, you need to understand how they are with money. You don't always have to agree with them, but you at least need to be aware of that, because I don't know what it's like in your country, but in America, you're responsible for each other's debts, right? So you could be really responsible with money, but if your husband's out there, taking out a 3rd mortgage on your house and things go bad, you end up in trouble.
I love the examples of the shift, and I love the illustration of the seeds falling down, the bagel seeds, and the floor wiping it off. And I think it's such an important point that you feel like you don't have a choice. So I had it with dishes. I would cry doing the dishes. I felt so sorry for myself. But then I realized I have 3 choices that doesn't involve a pity party while doing dishes, and that I can hire somebody to do it. Or like cleaning up, you can leave it, or you can clean it up, or you can hire someone to do it. You always have an option without hosting a pity party or blaming or complaining. You do have that. You just don't feel stuck in a corner, right? Like you have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's even though Brian will do the dishes, I don't like the way he does the pots. So I finally told him, I said, listen, you clean up, you do the dishes, but leave the pots for me. because even though I tried to show him the way I would like the pots done, it was just easier at the end of the day just to do it my way, and there are things that I do that he doesn't like. I mean, some of it's so stupid. Like, so we have a garbage can, and next to the garbage can, we have the recycling bin, right? And they're both outside the kitchen. So, when I have stuff to put in the recycling bin, I throw it in there. I just taught, whether it's a bottle or a newspaper, I just throw it in there. Well, for reasons I still don't understand, Brian likes to organize the recycling bin so that the bottles are standing up and the newspapers are folded and tucked behind them. Like, he has a system,
You annoy him.
And because for whatever reason, and he doesn't have OCD, but there's some OCD-ness about it, that when he looks in the recycling bin, he likes to see it organized.
Yeah.
Do I need to understand this? No, life is complicated enough. I just have now gotten into the habit of trying not to make too big a mess out of the recycling bin, just because it makes him happy. And really, his happiness is as important to me as my own happiness is.
That does sound like permanent love. I found that when we haven't connected, it could also be connection inside myself. If it'd been a while before connecting with love or your husband, those small things became big issues that then would go away after feeling connection, which was like love and bliss and all that. And then over time it would come back. So there's probably a constant connection you can tap into where you really have that choice.
Well, I think, deciding to be loving is a hour by hour choice.
Yeah.
I mean, human beings are annoying. Right? I mean, life is hard, and being with another human is even harder. So you just have to sort of pick your battles, and then learn how to have a dialogue where you're not shaming and blaming, but you're asking for what you want or need in a way that's kind and loving and appropriate. And, most people they get triggered, and then they get angry, and then they lash out, and then they say things they later regret. That's what children do.
Yeah, that's what I did. But I also found out there was so much wisdom in my triggers. So everything that triggered me, like I'd say, you're so slow, but then the flip side was efficient and patient. And when I flipped it all around, I'm like, gee, there's all the qualities I lack. So that's why God put him in front of me. And I saw that. It was like, whoa.
I had the same thing when Brian and I got together. We started a business together. Oh my God. I'm somebody who, you put something in front of me and it's done. I don't like things sitting around and waiting. You put something in front of him, it could take 8 days. And it's like, and I'd ask him, well, you're not that busy. Why can't you do it now? He said, well, I'm still thinking about it. Usually these were contracts or stuff. He goes, and I want to read it again. And I really want to take my time and make sure this is in our best interest. So I live in the world where not things have to be perfect. They have to be good enough. Done. But when it came to putting his name on a contract, he wanted it to be perfect. So even though it was in my best interest to let him operate in his system, it would still piss me off.
Yeah. And that's still now today, that's my big lesson, patience. But I want to share a funny story about the dishes. I'd heard somebody on YouTube say, stop hosting your own pity party. And when I was about to cry again doing the dishes, the same old story, I heard her voice and I just started laughing. So today, stop hosting your own pity party really just zoop. It just made me, change the stories and laugh instead of crying, because you get wired up in this sense, right? With your pity party, and you get the same flow going and
Yeah. I try to talk myself out of pity parties. Actually, I give myself 3 minutes to have the pity party. And I make it really bad. Like I really exaggerate how horrible my life is for 3 minutes. And then I stop. And then I try to, wabi-sabi my way back into sanity.
I love that. I love the expression.
I just want to say one thing about wabi-sabi though. There's a couple of areas in which it doesn't work. So if there's really bad behavior, active addiction, or abuse, you cannot wabi-sabi your way out of that. You need professional help.
So no addiction, no bad behavior.
No abuse.
No abuse.
Yeah, you can't be finding a wabi-sabi solution when somebody's, emotionally or physically abusing you, or they're not in their right mind from drugs or alcohol.
Of course not. Of course not.
Yeah.
But that all comes down to your own evolved state, I think. Yeah. So wabi-sabi, but of course not with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my pity parties were just, it was too extreme. Like I couldn't stop it. It was like it went rogue. I just couldn't stop myself. But I could stop it before they began. And it was great expectations. If I could nip that in the butt and not let that happen and just have zero expectations, I could manage them. But once they started, I just spiraled out of control, and it was just repercussions, because then I'd send these crazy texts to Torsten and my ex-husband, and then that would place distrust from him to me, because I wrote all these crazy things that I didn't mean when I was drunk on this pity party. But then he didn't trust me or my feelings, and neither should I, because those feelings were so seductive. They weren't real. They were telling me that he came home late because he didn't love me enough and all that, and it's so seductive. But I've learned a lot from having them.
Yeah, there's probably nothing better than relationship to power through your personal growth stuff.
Okay. I have one more question on my, I know we're running late here. What's the unknown secret to relationship success everyone needs to know? You may have already covered it.
Well, that's what we've been talking about, is wabi-sabi
Wabi-sabi.
love. I mean, that really is the way to go.
Okay. So before we touch on your free gift, do you have anything you want to share with the woman watching to help her just shift her life and manage her emotions?
I'll tell you one more wabi-sabi story that I think will be really helpful. So I was teaching a workshop on this a couple of years ago, and this woman stood up and she said, I have a problem even you can't solve. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, well, my name's Stephanie, and I've been married to Garth for 16 years. And I'm a perfectionist. I'm a clean freak. I'm a neat Nick. I like everything in its place. And he's a total messy slob. And she said, I just really can't take it anymore. And she said, the thing that's been keeping us together is that he works out of state 2 weeks of every month. So while he's gone, the house is neat and pristine and beautiful. But then as soon as he gets home, it's all messy again, and it's making me crazy. So I thought about it for a minute, and I said to her, well, Stephanie, do you have a dog? And she said, yes. And I said, well, does your dog shed? And she said, yes. I said, what do you do when your dog sheds? She said, oh, I vacuum up after him. And I said, okay. And I said, do you love your dog? And she got really quiet. And then she said, oh my God, Garth sheds.
Wow.
And in that moment, she really got, just like the dog can't help shedding, Garth can't help being a slob. It's just who he is. So she seemed very pleased with that. And then I pretty much forgot about it. And a year later, I started working on my book, Turn Your Mate into Your Soulmate. And I thought, I wonder how Stephanie and Garth are doing. Was that like an aha moment in a workshop, or did anything really change? So I called the promoters of the event, and I said, I know this is probably impossible, but I want to find this woman, Stephanie, who was in my workshop, and I know she's married to a guy named Garth. And the woman on the phone said, oh, I know who she is. Here's her phone number.
Wow.
So I know, I was very fortunate. So I called her and I said, well, how are things? And she was like, just sort of mooning over it. She said, oh my God, things have never been better. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, Garth quit his out-of-state job to start a home-based business so we could be together 24/7. And yes, he's still a slob.
Wow.
So that's the possibility of wabi-sabi.
I love that, because we women get to put it in perspective. We have love, we have what everybody wants, and then we like mess it up with our emotions and our nagging. Men do the same their way. So I love that story. Just be appreciative of what we have.
Exactly.
All right, thank you so much. And your free gift is a chapter of your book.
Yeah, actually, it's a couple of chapters of Turn Your Mate into Your Soulmate, and it's very easy to find on my website. It's right.
I'm going to link to it in the interview.
You're going to give them a link, which is great. And I also have a weekly newsletter with tips on love and relationship, comes out every Tuesday. And then on my website, soulmatesecret.com, there's a tab called free stuff. So you can check that out as well.
I'll link directly to that tab. Arielle, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. La Jolla, not Infinita. Now I get it right. I need to come back soon. I miss San Diego.
All right. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.